The grand hall of Cronus Prime Station stretched out like a cathedral of glass and steel. Representatives from 40 different species filled the chamber, their voices creating a symphony of alien languages. At the center of it all sat Princess Nala of the Verith Dominion, her silver skin gleaming under the artificial lights. She wore the traditional robes of her house, deep purple fabric that seemed to absorb light itself. Around her neck hung the spiral of command, a crystalline ornament that marked her as third in line to the Verith throne. Nala looked down at the assembled delegates with barely concealed contempt. The Verith had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Every species in this room owed their position to Verith mercy or Verith conquest. She drummed her long fingers on the armrest of her elevated chair, bored by the endless talk of trade agreements and border disputes. Then he walked in. Admiral Jiho of the Terran Coalition moved through the crowd with quiet confidence. He was tall for a human, his dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. He wore a simple military uniform, dark blue with minimal decoration. Unlike the other delegates who arrived with large entourages, Jiho brought only 2 aides. Nala found this amusing. Humans were so new to galactic politics that they didn't even understand the importance of proper presentation. The summit's moderator, a floating jellyfish-like creature called Ambassador Thel, introduced the human delegation. Jiho stepped forward and bowed slightly to the assembly. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. Thank you for allowing humanity a voice in this council. We come not as conquerors or supplicants, but as equals seeking peaceful coexistence with all species. Nala laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber, sharp and cutting. Several delegates turned to look at her. She stood up, her movements deliberate and theatrical. Equals? She said, her voice dripping with mockery. Your species discovered faster than light travel barely 50 years ago. My people were building stargates when your ancestors were living in caves. You call yourselves equals? Jiho met her gaze without flinching. Technology does not measure worth, Princess Nala. Every species brings unique strengths to the galactic community. Unique strengths, Nala repeated, descending the steps of her platform. Her courtiers followed behind her like a purple wave. She circled Jiho slowly, examining him as one might examine an interesting insect. Tell me, Admiral, what unique strengths do humans possess? You have no natural armor like the Kelmer. You lack the telepathic abilities of the Lomesh. Your ships are generations behind Verith engineering. What exactly makes you special? Jiho remained still as she circled him. We adapt. We endure. We stand together when challenged. These are the strengths that brought us from Earth to the stars. Pretty words, Nala said. She returned to face him directly. But words mean nothing without proof. The galaxy respects power, Admiral. Power is all that matters. Your species wandered into space with primitive rockets and somehow stumbled onto FTL technology. You are children playing with tools you don't understand. The chamber had gone silent. Every delegate watched the confrontation. Ambassador Thel floated nervously between them, its translucent body pulsing with agitated colors. Perhaps we should move to the next item on the agenda, Thel suggested. But Nala wasn't finished. An idea had formed in her mind, cruel and perfect. She would humiliate these upstart humans in front of the entire galactic community. She would remind everyone why the Verith Dominion remained supreme. I propose a wager, she announced loudly. An ancient tradition among civilized species. A test of strength between the Verith and humanity. Jiho's expression didn't change, but his aide, a younger woman named Lieutenant Bora, tensed visibly. Thel's body flashed warning colors. Princess Nala, such wagers are rarely invoked in modern times. The consequences can be severe. I am aware, Nala said. She turned to address the full assembly. Let it be recorded before this council. I, Princess Nala of House Vareth, challenge the Terran Coalition to defend one of their worlds against Vareth military force. I will select the target. We will have 1 standard year to achieve conquest. If we succeed, humanity will submit to Vareth authority and provide 20 years of service to our empire. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates began speaking at once. Mora grabbed Jiho's arm, whispering urgently, but he gently pulled away. And if humanity successfully defends? Jiho asked calmly. Nala smiled. Then the Vareth will withdraw from 12 occupied systems and grant them full independence. We will also formally recognize human sovereignty and equal standing in galactic affairs. The offer was substantial, Nala knew. Those 12 systems represented millions of beings living under Vareth rule. But she wasn't worried. The Vareth military had never failed to conquer a world when committed fully. This would be a lesson the humans wouldn't forget. Fel floated between them again. Admiral Jiho, you are not required to accept. Refusal carries no dishonor in such circumstances. But Nala knew he would accept. She could see it in his eyes. These humans had their pride, foolish as it was. If he refused, humanity would be mocked as cowards. Every other species would see them as weak. Their diplomatic efforts would mean nothing. Jiho looked at his aide, then at the assembled delegates. He squared his shoulders. On behalf of the Terran Coalition, I accept Princess Nala's challenge. The chamber erupted. Some delegates cheered. Others shouted protests. Fel's body flashed through a dozen colors in rapid succession. But the words had been spoken. By ancient galactic law, the wager was binding. Nala felt a surge of triumph. I choose the world called New Jeju, your agricultural colony in the Outer Rim. I will bring a full battle fleet and 50,000 warriors. Your farmers will learn what it means to face the Vareth Dominion. She had studied human colonies carefully. New Jeju was perfect for her purposes. It had a small defensive garrison, maybe 5,000 soldiers at most. The population consisted mainly of farmers and their families. The world exported grain and vegetables to other human colonies, but had no strategic military value. It would fall quickly, and the humiliation would be complete. Jiho's face remained impassive. New Jeju will be ready for you, Princess. I'm sure they will try, Nala said dismissively. She turned to her courtiers. Prepare my flagship. We depart within the week. I want to personally witness humanity's defeat. As she swept out of the chamber, her entourage trailing behind her, Nala felt satisfied. This would be remembered as the day the Vareth reminded the galaxy of their supremacy. These primitive humans needed to understand their place in the cosmic order. She would teach them that lesson personally. Behind her, Jiho stood quietly in the center of the chamber. Bora approached him cautiously. Sir, New Jeju only has a light garrison. The population is mostly civilians. How can we possibly defend against a full Vareth battle fleet? Jiho looked at her, and for the first time, he smiled slightly. Lieutenant, you're thinking like a Vareth. That's their weakness. They believe overwhelming force guarantees victory. But they've never fought humans who are defending their homes. Send a message to Governor Hyan on New Jeju. Tell him to prepare the population. Tell him we're going to show the galaxy what humanity is really made of. As the chamber slowly emptied, the stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Governor Hyan stood on the observation deck of New Jeju's orbital station, watching the Vareth fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel. 50 warships materialized in the system like dark flowers blooming in the void. At their center floated the massive flagship Eternal Supremacy, its hull decorated with the spiral symbols of House Vareth. The fleet arranged itself in perfect formation, A demonstration of military precision meant to inspire fear. Hyam had been expecting them for 3 months. In that time, he had transformed his peaceful agricultural world into something the Verith wouldn't recognize. The former Marine had served in humanity's early expansion wars, back when Earth's colonies fought over resources and territory. He knew how to prepare for invasion. "All civilians are in the shelters?" he asked his aide, a young man named Teeman. "Yes, sir. The last families entered the cave systems an hour ago. Surface cities are empty except for militia units." Hyan nodded. New Jeju was blessed with extensive cave networks formed by ancient lava flows. The colonists had expanded these natural shelters, building underground facilities that could support the entire population for years if necessary. The underground farms still produced food. The geothermal generators still provided power. The Verith could bombard the surface all they wanted. His people would be safe below. The communication system crackled to life. Princess Nala's face appeared on the screen, her silver features arranged in an expression of cold superiority. "Governor Hyan of New Jeju, I am Princess Nala of the Verith Dominion. You have one opportunity to surrender. If you do so immediately, your people will be treated as servants rather than slaves. If you resist, we will show no mercy." Hyan smiled at the screen. "Princess, I have a message from the people of New Jeju. We decline your generous offer. Come and take our world if you can." Nala's expression flickered with anger. "So be it. Your stubbornness will cost thousands of lives." The transmission ended. Within minutes, the orbital bombardment began. Verith warships fired precision strikes at military installations, communication towers, and power stations. Explosions bloomed across New Jeju's surface like deadly fireworks. The capital city of Manseo took the worst of it. Its spaceport and garrison buildings reduced to rubble in the first wave, but the destruction was mostly cosmetic. Hyan had evacuated all critical personnel and equipment weeks ago. The buildings that exploded were empty shells. The power stations were decoys. The real infrastructure lay deep underground, protected by hundreds of meters of solid rock. After 2 hours of bombardment, Verith dropships descended through New Jeju's atmosphere. 50,000 warriors in powered armor landed in the fields surrounding Minseo. They moved in perfect formation, expecting resistance. Instead, they found abandoned streets and silent buildings. Commander Zethral led the Verith ground forces. He was a veteran of 30 campaigns, having conquered 12 worlds for the Dominion. As his troops spread through the empty city, he felt uneasy. This wasn't how invasions were supposed to go. Where were the defenders? Where was the panicked civilian population? "Secure the government district," he ordered. "Find me the governor's office. Someone must know where they're hiding." His troops moved through the city systematically, clearing buildings one by one. They found nothing. No people, no supplies, no indication of where the humans had gone. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. Then the attacks began. Minji crouched in the forest, overlooking the valley where the Verith had established their main camp. She was 32 years old, a farmer's wife who had never fired a weapon in anger before 3 months ago. Now she commanded a resistance cell of 40 fighters, men and women who had learned warfare through necessity. "The patrol is coming," whispered Daeum beside her. He was younger, barely 20, but he had proven himself clever and brave. He held a human-made rifle, his design simple but effective. Minji watched through her scope as a Verith patrol of 12 warriors moved along the forest path. They walked confidently, their powered armor making them feel invincible. They didn't understand that confidence was a weakness on New Jeju. "Wait for my signal," she breathed. The Verith patrol walked directly into the kill zone. Minji squeezed her rifle's trigger. The shot hit the lead warrior in the neck joint, the one weak point in Verith armor that her people had identified. The warrior fell. Chaos erupted as her entire cell opened fire from concealed positions. The Vareth tried to return fire, but they couldn't see their attackers in the dense forest. 2 more warriors fell before they managed to activate their shields. By then, Minji's people were already retreating through paths they had memorized, moving like ghosts between the trees. The patrol tried to pursue, but the forest was maze-like. When they finally emerged into a clearing, they found themselves facing hastily placed explosives. The blast killed 4 more warriors. The survivors called for air support, but by the time Vareth aircraft arrived, Minji's cell had vanished into tunnel entrances hidden beneath fallen logs and carefully placed brush. This pattern repeated across New Jeju. Vareth patrols ventured out and disappeared. Supply convoys were ambushed on mountain roads. Communication relays were sabotaged at night. The Vareth controlled the ground they stood on, but nothing more. Every meter of territory they tried to claim cost them soldiers and equipment. Princess Nala watched the casualty reports with growing frustration. 3 weeks into the occupation, her forces had lost 800 warriors. 800 against farmers and shopkeepers. It was humiliating. She summoned Commander Zithro to her flagship. Explain to me how the mighty Vareth military is being defeated by agricultural workers, she demanded. Zithro stood at attention, his armor scarred from a recent ambush. Princess, the humans refuse to fight conventionally. They hide in their caves and tunnels. They attack from ambush and retreat before we can respond. We control the cities, but the cities are empty. The real war is happening in the forests and mountains, and we are not trained for this type of combat. Then adapt, Nala snapped. You are Vareth warriors. You have conquered 100 worlds. Figure it out. But adapting wasn't easy. The Vareth military machine was designed for conventional warfare against conventional enemies. Their tactics assumed an opponent would defend fixed positions and accept battle when offered. The humans did neither. They were fluid, unpredictable. Infuriating. Hyam coordinated the resistance from a command center deep beneath Mount Baekdu, New Jeju's highest peak. Reports flowed in constantly from resistance cells across the planet. He studied the maps, moving virtual markers to represent Vareth positions and human activity. They're spreading themselves thin, observed Minji, who had come to the command center for a strategy meeting. Her face was gaunt from weeks of living in the field, but her eyes burned with determination. They're trying to control too much territory with too few soldiers. Good, Hyan said. Let them stretch. The more they spread out, the easier they are to hit. How are supplies? Adequate, reported Teeman. The underground farms are producing enough food. Ammunition is our main concern. We're losing weapons faster than we can replace them. I've sent word to Admiral Jiho, Hyan said. He's working on getting supplies through the blockade. Until then, we improvise. Use captured Vareth weapons when possible. Set traps instead of fighting directly. Make them afraid to leave their camps. As the weeks turned into months, the psychological toll on Vareth forces grew severe. Warriors who had expected a quick, glorious campaign found themselves trapped in an endless nightmare of ambush and sabotage. They couldn't sleep peacefully. They couldn't trust the ground beneath their feet. Every shadow might hide an enemy. Every quiet moment might precede an attack. Morale crumbled. Discipline problems emerged. Some Vareth soldiers began refusing patrol duty. Officers struggled to maintain order. Princess Nala, watching her perfect invasion dissolve into chaos, made a decision that would change everything. Bring me the chemical weapons, she told Zithril. If the humans want to hide in their caves like animals, we will flush them out. Zithril hesitated. Princess, chemical weapons are forbidden by the Galactic Accords. If we use them, the other species will turn against us. The other species fear us, Nala said coldly. They will do nothing. And the humans will finally learn the price of defying the Varith Dominion. Prepare the weapons. Target the Tayback Mountains. I want those caves filled with poison gas. 3 days later, Varith bombers flew over the Tibet range. They dropped canisters that released a pale green gas, heavier than air, that sank into every cave opening and tunnel entrance. The gas was designed to cause rapid respiratory failure. It killed quickly but painfully. 2,000 humans died in the Tibet shelters. Men, women, children, elderly. Families who had huddled together in the dark, believing they were safe. The gas found them all dead when the news reached Hyan's command center. Grown warriors wept openly. Minji, learning that her parents and younger sister had been in the Tayback shelters, said nothing. She simply picked up her rifle and walked out. Daeon found her an hour later, sitting alone in a dark tunnel, her face a mask of cold fury. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. Minji looked at him. "Now we show them what happens when you murder our families. Now we make them wish they had never come to our world." The images spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. A human journalist named Sujin, embedded with the resistance, had captured everything. The Varith bombers dropping their deadly cargo. The pale green gas sinking into the mountains. The bodies discovered later, families frozen in their final moments trying to protect each other. The recordings were raw, unedited, impossible to deny. On distant worlds, billions of beings watched in horror. The Varith Dominion had committed many crimes over their 3,000 years of rule, but they had always maintained a veneer of civilization. They had followed certain rules, respected certain boundaries. Chemical weapons against civilians crossed every line that separated conquest from genocide. Ambassador Thel called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 40 species gathered once more on Kronos Prime Station. This time, Princess Nala was not present. She remained on her flagship above New Jeju, refusing to answer summons. Admiral Jiho stood before the assembly. His uniform was rumpled, his face showing the strain of 6 months coordinating humanity's desperate defense. But his voice remained steady and clear. "You have all seen the evidence," he said. "The Varith have violated the Galactic Accords. 2,000 human civilians are dead, murdered by banned weapons. This is not war. This is not conquest. This is slaughter. What do you propose?" asked Representative Kelmer of the Kelmer people. His species had suffered under Varith rule for a century, and his voice carried barely suppressed anger. "I propose we end this," Jiho said simply. "Not just the invasion of New Jeju, but Varith dominance itself. They have ruled through fear and military might for too long. It is time for the galaxy to say enough." "You speak of war," observed Ambassador Thel. "War against the most powerful military force in known space. The cost would be enormous." "The cost of doing nothing is greater," Jiho countered. "Today it is humans dying in caves. Tomorrow it could be your people. The Varith have shown they will stop at nothing to maintain their power. We must stop them or we are all complicit in their crimes." A Lumesh representative, her crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns, spoke up. "The Terran Coalition proposes a military alliance?" "Yes," Jiho confirmed. "I call for the formation of a coalition of free worlds. Every species that has suffered under Varith expansion, every people who dream of independence, we can stand together. Separately, we are weak. Together, we can change the galaxy." The vote took 3 hours. Species debated, consulted their governments, weighed risks against opportunities. In the end, 27 species voted to join the coalition. They committed ships, soldiers, resources, and technology. The alliance was imperfect, hastily assembled, but it was real. On New Jeju, the resistance had transformed after the chemical attack. Minji led what became known as the Ghost Offensive. Her forces struck everywhere simultaneously, using the network of underground tunnels to appear and disappear like phantoms. But now their attacks carried a savage intensity that shook even hardened Vereth warriors. One night, 3 Vereth supply depots exploded within minutes of each other. The carefully coordinated assault destroyed enough equipment and ammunition to supply 10,000 soldiers. Vereth forces, already stretched thin, found themselves critically short of supplies. Daeon Cell ambushed the Vareth convoy on the Mountain Pass Road. The attack was so fierce that only 2 warriors escaped alive. When reinforcements arrived, they found Vereth vehicles burning and a message spray-painted on the rocks in the Vereth language. Remember Tabak. Governor Hein expanded operations beyond simple ambush. Using intelligence gathered from captured Vereth communications equipment, his forces began targeting specific officers. Commander Zethril himself narrowly escaped assassination when snipers hit his command vehicle. The attack killed his entire staff and left him shaken. Princess Nala, receiving reports of the deteriorating situation, refused to acknowledge reality. She ordered her commanders to intensify operations, to crush the resistance through overwhelming force. But overwhelming force was exactly what the humans wanted. Every Vereth escalation gave the resistance more targets, more opportunities, more reasons to fight. Then, 6 months to the day after the invasion began, the Coalition fleet entered the new Jeju system. It was not as large as the Vereth fleet, but it was diverse and determined. Kelmer battlecruisers, their hulls decorated with the scars of 100 rebellions. Thrin carrier vessels, each one transporting thousands of insectoid warriors eager to fight their former oppressors. Lumesh support craft with shield generators powerful enough to protect entire squadrons. And at the center, flying the blue flag of the Terran Coalition, Admiral Jiho's flagship, Indomitable, Princess Nala stared at the tactical display on the Bridge of Eternal Supremacy. Her fleet still outnumbered the Coalition, but her ships were worn down from months of supporting ground operations. Her crews were exhausted. Her warriors on the surface were trapped fighting an enemy they couldn't defeat. "Princess, they are hailing us," reported her communications officer. Nala straightened her robes. "Put them through." Admiral Jiho's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but resolute. Behind him, she could see representatives from a dozen species, all united against her. "Princess Nala," Jiho said, "your year is not yet complete, but the situation has changed. The Galactic Council has found you in violation of the Galactic Accords. You are ordered to withdraw your forces from New Jeju immediately and surrender yourself to answer for war crimes." Nala felt rage building in her chest. "You dare make demands of the Vereth Dominion? I still have 50 warships. I could destroy your pitiful fleet." "You could try," Jiho acknowledged. "But while we fight in space, what happens on the ground?" "Governor Hyans informed me that his forces are preparing a final offensive. Every Vereth soldier on New Jeju will be targeted simultaneously. You will lose your entire ground army. Is that a price you're willing to pay for pride?" Nala looked at her tactical officer, who nodded grimly. The analysis was correct. Her ground forces were in an impossible position. Spread across the planet, depleted, demoralized, they could not withstand a coordinated attack by the now experienced resistance forces. "This is impossible," Nala whispered. "We are Vereth. We do not lose to primitive species." "That is why you lost," Jiho said quietly. "You believed your own propaganda. You thought technology and tradition made you superior. But war is not won by the species with the best ships or the longest history. It is won by those willing to sacrifice everything for their homes and families. You never understood that about humanity." On New Jeju's surface, Governor Hyan gave the order. Every resistance cell, every militia unit, every armed civilian received the same message: Attack now. Attack hard. Attack everywhere. The operation was called Dawn Rising. As New Jeju's sun broke over the eastern continent, resistance forces emerged from their tunnels and struck. They hit supply lines, command posts, communication relays, barracks, and vehicle depots. They attacked with guns, with explosives, with Varith weapons they had captured, and with desperate courage. Born from 6 months of occupation and the memory of Tibek, Minji led her cell in an assault on the Varith garrison in Minseo. They moved through the ruins of the capital, using rubble for cover. Her people were outnumbered 3-1, but they had surprise and motivation. The Varith warriors, woken by explosions and gunfire, scrambled to defend positions they had thought secure. Dayan's unit seized control of the main landing zone, cutting off the Varith retreat route. They placed explosives on the landing pads and mined the approach roads. When Varith dropships tried to evacuate wounded warriors, Daehan's people shot them down. All across New Jeju, the same story played out. The humans had learned the cost of guerrilla warfare over 6 brutal months. Now they taught those lessons to their enemies with interest. Varith communications broke down as relay stations fell. Commanders lost contact with their units. Organized defense collapsed into individual fights for survival. Commander Zethral, trapped in a command bunker surrounded by resistance fighters, made the call that Princess Nala had refused to make. He ordered a general retreat. Whatever Varith forces could reach the landing zones were to evacuate immediately. Everything else was to be abandoned. In orbit, Nala watched her invasion dissolve. Her ground forces streamed toward landing zones in disorganized clusters, harried every step by human attacks. Dropships launched overloaded with desperate warriors. Equipment worth billions was left behind. Bodies of dead Varith littered the landscape. She had lost. The mighty Varith Dominion, conqueror of 100 worlds, had been defeated by farmers and shopkeepers on an agricultural colony that most of the galaxy had never heard of. Before this war, Admiral Jiho's message came through again. Princess Nala, this is your last chance. Surrender now, or we will engage your fleet. More deaths will not change the outcome. Nala looked at her officers. She saw fear in their eyes, and something else, resignation. They knew the truth. This war was over. Recall all forces, she said quietly. Prepare for withdrawal. I will surrender myself to the Galactic Council. Her officers moved to obey, relief evident on their faces. The nightmare was ending. As Varith ships began pulling back from New Jeju, breaking orbit to form up for retreat, something unprecedented happened across the tribunal chamber on Cronus Prime Station was built for judgment. Its walls were transparent, offering a view of the stars beyond, a reminder that justice served here affected the entire galaxy. Representatives from 40 species sat in tiered rows, facing the accused. At the center, in a simple metal chair, sat Princess Nala of House Varith. She had been stripped of her ceremonial robes. No longer did she wear the spiral of command. She sat in plain gray clothing, the same style given to any prisoner awaiting trial. Her silver skin seemed dull under the harsh courtroom lights. Her posture was rigid, but her eyes showed something that no one had ever seen from Varith royalty before. Fear. Ambassador Thel presided over the proceedings. The jellyfish-like being floated above the chamber, its translucent body pulsing with solemn colors. This tribunal has been convened to address violations of the Galactic Accords during the Varith invasion of New Jeju, Thel announced. Princess Nala stands accused of war crimes, specifically the use of chemical weapons against civilian populations. How does the accused respond to these charges? Nala stood slowly. Her voice, once so confident and mocking, now trembled slightly. The charges are based on misunderstanding of military necessity. The humans were using civilian shelters as military bases. Our actions were justified under the laws of war. Admiral Jiho rose from his seat among the Terran delegation. May I present evidence to the contrary? Thel gestured permission. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed surveillance footage from the Taebek Mountains, recordings made by humans inside the shelters. The images were devastating. Children playing with toys in underground chambers. Elderly people tending hydroponic gardens. Families gathered for evening meals. Then the gas, seeping in through ventilation shafts. The panic. The desperate attempts to seal doors. The choking. The dying. One recording showed a mother clutching her 2 young daughters as the gas overcame them. The camera kept recording long after they stopped moving. Several representatives turned away. Others made sounds of distress in their native languages. Even Ambassador Thel's usually neutral body flashed angry red patterns. These were not military targets, Jiho said quietly. These were civilians sheltering from an invasion. Farmers and their families. People whose only crime was living on a world that Princess Nala chose for her demonstration of Varath's superiority. Sujin, the human journalist who had documented the atrocity, was called to testify. She stood before the tribunal, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was describing. I was embedded with the resistance forces. I recorded everything. The Varath used chemical weapons knowing the shelters were filled with non-combatants. There was no warning given. No opportunity for evacuation. The attack was designed to terrorize the population into submission. Lies, Nala said, but her voice lacked conviction. Propaganda designed to discredit the Varath Dominion. Representative Kelmer stood. His people had suffered under Varath rule for generations. Princess Nala, you speak of propaganda, but we have all seen the evidence. Multiple independent sources confirm the same facts. 2,000 human civilians died because you chose to use banned weapons. You cannot deny this. I did what was necessary to end the conflict quickly, Nala insisted. Every day the war continued cost Varath lives. I made a difficult decision to save my own warriors. You made a criminal decision, corrected a Thren representative. Her insectoid features making her emotions difficult to read, but her tone was unmistakable. You chose to murder the innocent rather than admit defeat. That is not the action of a leader. That is the action of a war criminal. The tribunal heard testimony for 3 days. Governor Hyan described the occupation and its toll on New Jeju's population. Minji recounted finding her family's bodies in the Taebek shelters. Commander Zethra, granted immunity for his cooperation, admitted that military necessity was not the reason for the chemical attack. It was desperation and pride. Princess Nala could not accept that her invasion was failing, Zethra testified. She believed that one dramatic action would break human resistance. When I warned her about the Galactic Accords, she dismissed my concerns. She said the galaxy would not dare challenge Varath authority. On the 4th day, the tribunal delivered its verdict. Ambassador Thel announced the judgment in a voice that resonated through the chamber. Princess Nala is found guilty of war crimes under the Galactic Accords. The use of chemical weapons against civilian populations is a crime against all sentient beings. The sentence is as follows. Princess Nala is stripped of all titles, lands, and privileges. She is exiled from Varath space in perpetuity. She may never return to her homeworld or contact her family. Additionally, the Varath Dominion itself is held accountable. All occupied worlds are to be granted immediate independence. Reparations will be paid to affected populations. The Varath military will be reduced to defensive forces only. The chamber erupted in chaos. Varath representatives shouted protests. Species that had suffered under Varath rule cheered. Nala simply sat down, her face blank with shock. Everything she had known, everything she had been, was gone. Furthermore, Thel continued, waiting for silence. This tribunal recommends the formation of a permanent Galactic Justice Council to prevent such atrocities in the future. The age of empire by force is ended. We enter a new era of cooperation and mutual respect. Nala was escorted from the chamber by security forces. She moved like a person in a dream, unable to fully process what had happened. In 1 week, she had gone from princess of the galaxy's most powerful empire to a convicted criminal with nowhere to go. The political consequences rippled outward. On the Virith homeworld, the ruling council met in emergency session. The emperor himself, Nala's grandfather, addressed the nation. His message was brief and humiliating. We accept the tribunal's judgment. The Virith Dominion will comply with all terms. We acknowledge that our expansion was built on injustice. We commit ourselves to a new path. But words could not undo 3,000 years of dominance. The Varith had ruled through the perception of invincibility. That perception was shattered. Species that had served the Dominion out of fear now saw opportunity. Rebellions erupted on occupied worlds. Varith governors fled in the night. The empire that had seemed eternal crumbled within weeks. Nala watched this collapse from a small room on Cronus Prime Station. She was waiting for assignment to a permanent exile location. She had no money, no friends, no supporters. Her family had disowned her publicly, declaring that she had brought shame upon House Varith. Her former courtiers refused her messages. One person visited her during this dark time. Admiral Jiho requested a private meeting. The guards brought him to her room, a sparse chamber with a bed, a desk, and a small window showing the stars. "Why are you here?" Nala asked. She sat on the bed, no longer bothering with proper posture or dignity. "To talk," Jiho said simply. He pulled up the room's single chair and sat across from her. "I wanted you to understand something. I don't hate you, Princess Nala. I pity you." "Your pity is insulting," Nala said bitterly. "Perhaps," Jiho acknowledged. "But it's true. You were raised to believe that power and dominance were the only things that mattered. You were taught that other species were inferior. These beliefs destroyed you." "Your species destroyed me," Nala corrected. "Your stubborn refusal to accept your proper place in the galaxy's hierarchy." Jiho shook his head. "No. You destroyed yourself the moment you believed that military might gave you the right to rule others. The Varith could have been leaders through example, through innovation, through cooperation. Instead, you chose conquest. That path always leads to this moment, when the conquered finally say no more." Nala looked at him with something approaching curiosity. "What happens to me now?" "You serve your sentence," Jiho said. "You live with what you've done. And maybe, if you're fortunate, you learn from it." "Learn what?" "That every species is worth. That strength comes in many forms. That true leadership is about service, not dominance." He stood to leave. "There's a station in neutral space that has agreed to accept you. You'll work there, like anyone else. No special treatment. No privilege. Just a chance to live a quiet life." After he left, Nala sat alone in her room for a long time. Outside the window, ships came and went from Cronus Prime. Each one carried beings with hopes, dreams, and purposes. She had never thought about such things before. She had only thought about power and position. For the first time in her life, Princess Nala wept. 2 years had passed since the tribunal. Nala scrubbed floors in the lower levels of Station Meridian, a remote outpost on the edge of civilized space. The work was hard and humbling. Her silver skin, once a mark of nobility, now bore calluses from manual labor. She shared quarters with 3 other workers, sleeping in a bunk bed like any common laborer. The station was home to refugees and workers from a dozen species. Nobody knew she had been a princess. Nobody cared about her past. She was simply Nala, the maintenance worker who cleaned corridors and waste disposal systems. The irony was not lost on her. Her roommate was a Kelmer woman named Rena, whose family had died in Verith labor camps. They worked together in silence for months before Rena learned Nala's true identity. Nala expected hatred, perhaps violence. Instead, Rena simply looked at her sadly and said, "I hope you think about them sometimes. The people who died because of your pride." "I think about them every day," Nala admitted quietly. Another roommate was Sujin, the human journalist who had documented the Tibet massacre. She had moved to Station Meridian to write a book about the war. When she discovered Nala living in the same quarters, she requested permission to interview her. Nala agreed, though she didn't know why. "Do you regret what you did?" Sujin asked during their first recorded conversation. Nala was silent for a long time. "Regret is too simple a word for what I feel. I dream about those people in the caves. I see their faces. I hear their final moments. I carry that weight every second of every day. But if you could go back, would you make different choices?" "Yes," Nala said without hesitation. "But saying yes now is easy. The difficult truth is that the person I was 2 years ago believed she was justified. She believed Verith's superiority was a fact of nature, not a choice. Changing that belief required losing everything." The interviews continued over several weeks. Sujin recorded hours of conversation. Nala spoke about her upbringing, about the culture of dominance that shaped Varus society, about the systematic dehumanization of other species that made atrocities possible. The book that emerged from these conversations would become a standard, text on the dangers of supremacist thinking. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to transform. The coalition of free worlds had grown into a permanent alliance. Worlds liberated from Varith rule were rebuilding with assistance from the coalition. New Jeju, scarred but surviving, had become a symbol of resistance and resilience. Governor Hyan led the planet's reconstruction efforts. The underground shelters were being expanded and improved. The surface cities, destroyed in the invasion, were rebuilt with defensive considerations in mind. New Jeju would never again be unprepared for war. Minji had become a hero to her people and an advocate for veterans struggling with trauma. She spoke publicly about the cost of war, about losing her family, about the rage that had consumed her. "Victory doesn't heal all wounds," she told audiences. "We won, but we lost so much. We must remember both parts of that truth." One morning, Nala received an unexpected message. Minji had requested to meet with her. The message included travel authorization to New Jeju. Nala stared at the screen for an hour, unable to comprehend why the woman whose family she had killed would want to see her. She almost declined. What could possibly be gained from such a meeting? But something in Minji's brief message made her reconsider. "I need this," Minji had written. "Maybe you do too." The journey to New Jeju took 3 days. Nala traveled in the cargo hold of a merchant vessel, working for passage as she could no longer afford tickets. When she arrived, she barely recognized the planet. The ruins of war had been replaced by new construction. Fields once torn by battle now produced crops. Children played in parks built over former combat zones. Minji met her at the spaceport. She was thinner than in the tribunal recordings, her face lined with experiences that had aged her beyond her years. They looked at each other in silence. Then, without a word, Minji gestured for Nala to follow. They traveled to the Taebaek Mountains. The journey was quiet, neither woman knowing what to say. At the base of the mountain, Minji led Nala up a newly built path to a memorial site. Thousands of names were carved into black stone walls that curved around a central flame that burned day and night. 2,347 names, Minji said. "Every person who died when you used chemical weapons. My mother's name is there. My father's. My younger sister Hana. She was 11 years old. Nala approached the wall slowly. The names were written in multiple languages, representing the diversity of New Jeju's population. She read them, one after another, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what she had done. Each name was a life ended, a future stolen, a family broken. "Why did you bring me here?" Nala asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because I needed to look at you while standing in front of their names," Minji said. "I needed to see if you understood what you took from us. And I needed to see if you were still the arrogant princess who thought other lives didn't matter. And what do you see?" Minji studied her carefully. "I see someone carrying a burden. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if anything could be enough. But it's something." They sat together by the memorial for a long time. Other visitors came and went, leaving flowers and small tokens by the names of their loved ones. Eventually, Minji spoke again. "I spent 2 years angry. Angry at you, angry at the Varath, angry at the universe for letting this happen. But anger is exhausting. It consumes everything else. I can't build a life on rage alone. What will you build it on?" Nala asked. "Memory, purpose, the determination that what happened here never happens again." Minji turned to face her directly. "Governor Hyan has a proposal for you. He wants you to work as a cultural advisor to the coalition. Your knowledge of Varath society, their power structures, their way of thinking, it could help prevent future conflicts." Nala was stunned. "Why would you want my help?" "Because you understand how supremacist cultures function. You were shaped by one. You can help us identify and counter those patterns in other societies before they lead to war." Minji paused. "It won't erase what you did. Nothing can. But it might give meaning to the suffering you caused. I don't deserve that opportunity." "No, you don't," Minji agreed bluntly. "But this isn't about what you deserve. It's about what the galaxy needs. We need people who understand how empires justify their cruelty. We need voices that can speak truth about the cost of dominance. You can be one of those voices, or you can spend the rest of your life scrubbing floors. Either way, my family is still dead." The harsh words hit Nala like a physical blow, but they were true. She had a choice. She could hide in her guilt, or she could use her experience to prevent others from making her mistakes. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "I'll help however I can." Over the following months, Nala became an unlikely asset to the coalition. She advised diplomats on Varath negotiating tactics. She helped identify warning signs of aggressive expansion in other species. She spoke to military academies about the dangers of believing in one's own superiority. The work was difficult and often painful. She faced hostility wherever she went. Many saw her as a war criminal who had escaped true justice. But slowly, grudgingly, some began to see value in her contributions. A crisis with an aggressive species was diffused partly because coalition negotiators, following Nala's advice, understood how pride and face-saving could be used to avoid conflict. A potential genocide was prevented when Nala identified the rhetorical patterns that preceded atrocities. 3 years after the tribunal, New Jeju held a ceremony marking the 5th anniversary of the invasion's end. Thousands gathered at the Tebek Memorial. Governor Hyan gave a speech about resilience and hope. Admiral Jiho, now a senior coalition leader, spoke about unity and the importance of learning from history. Nala attended, standing at the back of the crowd. She didn't belong at the center of the ceremony. This wasn't her victory to celebrate. But Minji had insisted she come, saying that remembrance required the presence of all who were changed by those events. After the formal speeches, there was a tree planting ceremony. Survivors and veterans planted young trees around the memorial, symbols of new growth from devastated soil. Minji approached Nala with a sapling and a shovel. "Help me plant this one," she said. "It's for Hannah. She loved trees." Together, They dug a hole in the rich earth of New Jeju. Sujin joined them, then Governor Hyan, then others. The act was simple but profound. Human and Verith, victim and perpetrator, working together to create something that would grow long after they were gone. As Nala patted soil around the young tree's roots, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not happiness, exactly, but perhaps the possibility of peace. She would never forgive herself for what she had done. The weight of those 2,000 names would stay with her forever. But maybe, just maybe, she could use that weight to build something better. That night, she stood alone at her quarters window, looking up at the stars. The galaxy had changed so much in 5 years. The Verith Dominion was a shadow of its former self, no longer an empire but a single species among many. Dozens of worlds were free for the first time in centuries. The Coalition of Free Worlds was creating new models of cooperation and justice and humanity. Those primitive newcomers she had mocked had proven